I first learned about Audre Lorde in seminary with a line that one of my professors dropped into one of their talks. It was this: "You cannot dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. And I instantly thought, Audre Lorde knows how to get a message across, right? It was so succinct and so understandable and so instructive about how to do anti-oppression work. You cannot dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. And so I got curious, who was this Audre Lorde? And so I did a little Googling, and I came across two pieces of hers. One was this 1985 essay that Jane just read an excerpt of, "Poetry is Not a Luxury," which gave me a lot of new nuggets. Perhaps life isn't a problem to be solved. Perhaps living isn't a problem to be solved. Perhaps there is this dark, ancient, creative power within us that holds wisdom and feeling and insight, that moves from those fertile places to ideas to action. Perhaps there is a way that poetry guides us there. And I began to read some of her poems. The one that I first found and that penetrated me so deeply, was powerful, was her poem Power, which she wrote on the spot. I hope she pulled over, because she was listening to the driving as she was listening to the radio, and she heard about an acquittal of a white police officer who had shot a young child. And her poetry, her words in that poem, Power, I suggest you look it up if you want to experience it too, shared with me a level of devastation, of rage, of wonder, of analysis. Not just that there was a hatred and active white supremacist system involved in the police officer, but also in the decision. And all of that was going to keep churning if we could not find the way to hold on to our humanity and really understand the humanity in others. And I'll tell you, that poem, Power, it is alive in me every time I hear anything like that in the news. It opens my heart to the real understanding of what is going on. Poetry is my gateway into humanity and understanding. Then it got me curious about who was Audre Lorde, right? Who was this person? Because there's always a person behind any piece of art. I love that she's from New York like me. She was born in the Depression in New York to West Indian immigrant parents. And from a young age, she read poetry. This was not like me. And she read so much poetry that when someone would ask her, "How are you doing today?" she would answer by reciting a piece of poetry she had read. And she did this because there was often a line or two in that poem that answered the question, "How are you doing?" Imagine a 9-year-old being asked how you're doing and not just answering, good or fine. Imagine a 40-year-old not just answering good or fine, but really providing an answer of how truly they are doing in their mind and body and spirit. By the age of 12 or 13, she discovered life situations or questions that she didn't have an answer that she could recite, i.e. someone else's words, and so she wrote her first poem. She was published while still in high school and went on from there. But what she said was, the reason why she was doing this was there was a way that poetry helped her articulate what really needed to be said. I too find myself as I journey through life, finding that poetry, specific poems, specific lines, are in dialogue with me, are providing me with the words I need to express a particular feeling or perspective or insight or piece of wisdom. The kind of gift that that moment is so eloquently calling for. Now, I'd say there was nothing at all to lead me to believe that I would have a relationship or this kind of relationship with poetry. I was an almost English major in college. I switched to history and was an English minor, but I avoided all poetry classes as much as possible. I did this. I don't think so. And then about 7 years ago, I got a certificate in spiritual direction. And oh boy, in spiritual direction, you would use this third source. It's like you and a person or you and a group and this other thing. And that other thing was almost always poetry. And so I began to read, particularly when I came here about 3 years ago, and I have this 9 a.m. spiritual direction group. The people who've come really like it. And every week, pretty much, let's say we don't meet every week because sometimes I go on vacation, but let's just say 47 weeks out of a year, we're reading and sitting with a poem for an hour. We read it, and we read it again, and we reflect on it, and then we share how our spirits are responding to the poem, and we're developing a greater insight and understanding of each other. And I'll tell you, at the end of that hour, that poem is our friend. We've journeyed with it, we know it, its words are sometimes a mantra in our mind. And so I have come to have a little canon of poems within me. And I'm going to share some of them with you and share the moments that they come back to me. We're going to start with Audre Lorde, of course. Who said it was simple? There are so many roots to the tree of anger that sometimes the branches shatter before they bear. Sitting in knee-dicks, the women rally before they march, discussing the problematic girls they hire to make them free. An almost white counterman passes a waiting brother to serve them first, and the ladies neither notice nor reject the slighter pleasures of their slavery. But I, who am bound by my mirror, as well as my bed, see causes in color as well as sex, and sit here wondering which me will survive all these liberations. In one way or another, for 25 or more years, I have been gathering with groups of friends, first in my school and then in congregations, and sometimes in school and congregations, seeking liberation, seeking create the beloved community. And the number of times it goes sideways. The number of times it goes sideways. And and often it goes sideways not because of big disagreements of what we're trying to create together, but because of small betrayals. Small betrayals, small ways we pick sides, small ways that we show we value one person over another person, or some comfort over another person, or some habit over another person or over ourselves. Who said it would be simple? And so I go back to this poem and remember to think about people first. And sometimes also remember there are so many roots to the tree of anger that sometimes the branches shatter before they bear. Sometimes what movement looks like is not the bearing of fruit right then. Fruit trees do not bear fruit throughout the year. Sometimes it's enough nourishment, enough repair, enough healing, that what they're doing is accumulating the nutrients, the sugar, the potential, the energy to bear fruit the next time. And sometimes I think about the person, generally not me, but generally the person like Audre Lorde, a black, queer woman raised without much economic security, who is sitting there somewhere in the room, or somewhere who, after she just left the room, who is wondering which me will survive all these liberations. Because the thing I think about is getting to a place of liberation where we've left some people behind isn't what I'm talking about. We all need to be on that journey together, and we have to care about each other and care about allowing all of ourselves to move into liberation. And so when times get tough, I think about this and the intentions that I want to live out. This poem, this excerpt by Rumi, I come back to a lot, and I would confess that I didn't know this was actually a super long poem. I really only knew the beginning lines that you see here. They're in the middle of the poem. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. There are people that I love, and we are just not in agreement. We're just not. And I think, every time that I think about what I did and what they did and whether or not I was right or how I could share with them that I knew I was wrong, the further I feel apart from them. And what I know in all of that is that the relationship I have with them is more important than the right and the wrong. And I just say in my spirit to them, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there, as a way to invite myself to let go about those things that we're fighting for and really close the gap between myself and other. I'm going to move a little quickly because of time. Faith by David White. I want to write about faith, about the way the moon rises over cold snow, night after night, faithful even as it fades from fullness, slowly becoming that last curving and impossible sliver of light before the final darkness. But I have no faith myself because I refuse it even the smallest entry. Let this then, my small poem, like a new moon, slender and barely open, be the first prayer that opens me to faith. You know, every once in a while I could get bitter. I could get bitter and hardened, and I just don't have faith in someone anymore, or have faith that something will change. I just refuse it, even the barest, smallest entry. And so then I think, oh yeah, that's how I am. That's how I'm being. And then I think about this poem and taking a small risk. And I say, let this then, my small poem, or prayer or intention, like a new moon, open me to faith that something can change. Earthworms by Lynn Unger. She's a UU poet, so we got to do hers. People know I have a thing for earthworms. Imagine the only thing God requires of them is a persistent, wriggling, moving forward, passing the earth through the crinkled tube of their bodies in a motion less like chewing than like song. Everything they encounter goes through them, as if sunsets, drugstore clerks, diesel fumes, and sidewalks were to move through our very centers and emerge subtly different for having fed us, looser somehow, more open to the possibility of life. There's this notion that we move through the world. I feel like this poem helped me understand how much that's like a colonial mindset. I am here and there are lands and I will journey through them and see what I see as like an edge of exploration. And instead, it's actually completely the opposite. Everything I encounter should move through me. Even all the stuff that seems like I wouldn't want it coming through me, somehow emerges subtly different for having fed me. Even that feeds me. And it comes out looser somehow, more open to the possibility of life. Isn't this what we're called to do? Not move through life just observing it, but actually have life come through us, have it nourish us, have that process lead the world to be a better place. And this is the one I probably come back to most often. Because life is full of grief and despair and overwhelm, and it's hard and too much. And I just can't hold it. And so I say this poem as a prayer, as an act of faith to myself. The Peace of Wild Things by Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life or my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting in their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free. So, my dear ones, may you know within yourself some dark, alive, creative center that holds a wisdom for living. And may you find some door knocker that will help you open that place within yourself. Perhaps some line of poetry, perhaps some act of kindness, perhaps quiet stillness. So you can invite out the thing you need, the phrase, the invitation, the insight, the courage that will allow you to experience a wholeness, a freedom, the courage to go forward and fully live life. May it be so, and amen.